you build that?
Yes, sir.
Oh my God, what workmanship.
It was a kit.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Good morning. Today we're going to start my review on the new 2023 Honda XR150L. And I'm going to do a little comparison between this and my old 1975 XL125, which was a bike that I truly loved, but unfortunately they quit making them. This is old school, like that bike, and we're going to go over some of the changes and features and see what's actually changed over the years and what's the good, the bad, and the ugly on this bike. Let's start with what's ugly. the foot pegs, when this came to me, tipped up in the air about that much. It was so uncomfortable. And of course they had rubber pads on them. And so I took them off, took the rubber pads off, first of all, to lower my height on the pegs for standing up. And then on the bottom side, I ground that down so that it could drop down farther. And after several attempts, I got them so that they're level. It looks like it's up a little bit because the bike's on the side stand, but I've got them level now. And that made all the difference in the world. The rubber pad that was on there had a really tall tip up on the end. So with these tipped up like that, and then that tip up on the end made it impossible to keep your feet on the pegs. So now that works. Okay, that was a very bad design. They've only been making these kind of pegs for this style of bike for what, 50, 60 years, and they can't get it right on something that simple. So, okay, this is built in Mexico, but it's mostly Chinese parts, I understand. So you're buying a cheap Chinese bike, basically is why it's only $29.71. Does say it has a Honda engine. I hope that's a Japanese built genuine Honda engine. If it is, it'll last a long time, and if it's some Chinese remake of the Honda engine, well, I wouldn't expect much life out of it. After it got about 60 miles on it, the idle speed went from about 800 RPM to about 1800. And so this is your idle adjustment screw here. Turn it counterclockwise about a quarter turn, and then your idle speed will come back down again, and it's been perfect ever since. This is very old school. It's got analog gauges on it, and the old style, you turn the trip odometer dial until all the numbers become 0 across there. And of course it reads the speed and distance from a gear-driven cable on the front wheel, just like the old bikes. So if you change your gearing ratio on this, different size sprockets, it will not affect your speedometer. Which brings us to another point. The speedometer on this bike is off differently than all my other bikes. All my other bikes read a lot faster than it's actually going, by about 3 to 4 miles an hour. This one is off 5 miles an hour from 45. You're actually doing 50. At 50, you're actually doing 55. At 55, you're actually doing 60 by a GPS. It starts off a little closer. At 30, you're doing 32. At 35, you're doing 38. At 40, you're doing 44. So it's off quite a bit. And changing the gear ratio, like I said, will not affect that. It'll always be off. I did add a clock to it, because I like to see what time it is. And I got a pair of bark busters, put the Storm plastic on them. And I contacted Barkbuster, and they didn't have one bike specific for this, but they took measurements, sent me pictures, had me measure from here to here, and we decided that the distance would work. They said they believed that this would work on this bike, so they sent this to me, and you can make it work, but it doesn't work very easily. First of all, you have to have a spacer in here, which I took off of my Versus X300, the bar end weights, because without that on there, with this up against here, your levers hit right about here. So that didn't work. So I modified that. Then, because this is parallel with the end of the handlebars, this stuck way out here. So you have to force it in, put it under high pressure, It doesn't actually bend this, but you're just under tension. You put it in there and you get the pieces on here. And because it's mounted so close to the turn, the bend in the handlebar, as you can see by the gap here, the handlebar gets distorted when they bend it, and it doesn't actually fit the handlebar. But that's the best I could do. They turned out looking all right, but it was quite an engineering feat to actually make them work. Now, like I said, this is old school. The 1975 Honda XL125 I had, of course, had an analog tachometer over here too. And if they were building this as cheaply as they could, like they have done, they could have left off all this plastic and used the money to put the old analog tachometer next to it to make it real retro. Make it just like the old bikes. And because it is an old style bike, it does not have fuel injection. It has a petcock. You run it till you run out of gas, and then you turn the lever up the other way onto reserve. It's got on, off, and reserve. It points this way. So it's on right now. You can't see it, but there's actually a little arrow embossed on that. I don't think we can get in close enough to see that. Anyway, the choke is a little harder to get at place than the old bikes were. They were on the outside, on the other side. This has got 2 stages, middle and on. And you never use the choke on this until it's below 50 degrees. It starts just fine in any kind of weather, down to about 50 supposedly. I've never used the choke on it to start it. So the only difference between the white bike, which they came out with first in April, and which I wanted and didn't get because I found out about them about a month too late. Didn't know they had started importing these into the United States. So I put in an order for a white one, but then when they got their July shipment in, which I got this June 30th, so it came in a few days early from their July shipment. All the dealers got 2 white ones in their first order, and they all got 2 black ones in their second order. So it was either take a black one or wait until September and hope they get some more white ones. And by then, they might be 2024s, and the price will go up $100 like they do every year with Honda. So I decided to go for the black one. If I wanted it to be white, I would just have to buy new plastic because the tank is black on all of them. So 1 piece of plastic there, the cowling 1 piece, the fender, and the side covers. And I could turn it into a white bike. And of course, the black plastic shows every little tiny scratch on it that the whites don't show. The black tank hasn't been too bad for showing scratches, but there's just so many little scratches on everything. It doesn't show up because of the one right here, because of the glare. But trust me, the black is just terribly scratched up all the time. It does come with a nice tail rack, pretty good size, but in order to get my Nelson rig tail bag on there, which I really love this tail bag. It's the biggest one they make in this style, and you can unzip it here and it expands up taller so you can get a full face helmet in it. But it's a very nice, got a lot of room in it. It's a very nice bag. But when I put that on the factory tail rack, it has to sit up here on the seat, and if you wanted to take a passenger, it would be in the way. So I welded up a little bit larger rack and put some braces and bolted it to it. So that worked out okay to be able to move it back. I also added a little bracket to it right here so that I could mount a strobing brake light. And you can change the frequency of the strobe by pushing this button that I installed right there. Changes the pattern, I should say. I've got a modulating headlight coming for it, or the modulator for the headlight, which will be easy to put on. We've got 4 bolts to hold this on. 1, 2. The whole headlight thing pulls off. You can unplug the back of the headlight, plug the modulator in. That'll be easy. All you have up here is your turn signal. 1 turn signal for both of them, so you never know which one you left on unless you can see it. Your high beam light, your neutral light. Honda did it different on this one. Honda's the only company that has changed where they put their turn signal and horn. Ever since the beginning of time, our horn has been on the bottom and the turn signal's been in the middle. Honda's changed over, and it's making it real hard for me to adjust to it because my Kawasaki and other bikes, all my other bikes, my Moto Guzzi that I just sold, my Vespa, all have it hooked up the old-fashioned way. But their new one that they just released has got it the old way. And I was thinking I would own all Hondas so that I could just learn to do it one way. But muscle memory makes me, every time I want to blow the horn on the newer bikes, I that should be the horn button. Always press the turn signal. And when I want to turn on the turn signal, I blow the horn every time. That's happened to a lot of other people. So Honda went back to the old style on this. I guess they had a bunch of those laying around. The switches are a little different. They got a little blue insert in the high-low beam. And over here on the kill switch, this pops up through a little hole in the bracket there. Just a little different. It does have a drum rear brake, old style of course, but they upgraded the front and put a disc on the front end. They don't have an ABS model. And all the lights are incandescent and with a halogen headlight. So the whole thing is very, very old school. When I lowered these pegs that were tipped up like this too much, when I lowered those down, I also had to, and I took the rubber pads off. And then my foot was too low for the pedals, the gear shift and the brake pedal. So I took that off and moved it down 1 notch. And on the brake pedal, you can adjust it right there. And then you have to adjust the switch that turns the light on. And of course you have to adjust the brake. But then you're able to lower the brake down to the proper position. Well, it's a very simple bike. That about covers everything on it. Oh, I wanted to mention that just like my old 1975 XL, there is no bosses under here to put a center stand on. So there are no aftermarket center stands for this. So if you want to hold it up, you'll have to make or buy some sort of a stand like this for oil changes. This does not have a filter. It's got the old school spinner filter inside the case of the engine. And I have a skid plate with an engine guard built onto it coming from the Ukraine, but so it's terrible shipping problems in the Ukraine because of the war over there. So I'm waiting for that. When I get that and my headlight modulator, which will be in this week, then we'll have it all ready to go. Oh, and this does have a dipstick instead of a sight glass. Now, this right here looks like it might have been the place for a sight glass, but that's actually the place for the Kickstarter, because in every country except the United States, they put a Kickstarter for a backup starter on it, and we never seem to get that here. They seem to drop that on just about every bike. Once in a while, the CT125 had it on there, but that was very unusual. If they have them in other countries, they almost always take them off for the United States. I don't know why that is. I wish they would just leave the Kickstarter on there. But I like a dipstick much better than a sight glass. And but of course, to check the oil, you need it level. And holding it with one hand to check a sight glass, balancing with one hand and getting down on your knees to look at it is much easier with a sight glass. When you have a dipstick, you have to put it in some sort of a bracket to hold it level, because you need two hands to pull the dipstick and wipe it off and stick it back in again. Now, when you take that dipstick out, there's an O-ring on it, and that O-ring tends to stay in the block. And then when you check the oil, which you check it by just sticking the dipstick in without screwing it in, you will read low. You have to remember to take that O-ring off and slide it all the way up onto the dipstick, and then set the dipstick in the hole and check it, and then it will check correctly. A little something they don't tell you about in the owner's manual. And of course, it is set up for a passenger. The seat is very difficult to get off. It doesn't just have a key lock and pull off. You've got to take off these side covers here first. You take this bolt off, and then it's got some little plastic pegs that go to rubber grommets. You pull that off. Do the same thing to the other side. Then you've got a bolt on each side of the seat. You do that and take it off. And if you want to get at the taillight bulb, it's not old school like our old ones that had a screw on each side that you just pulled it off and took it off. Then you've got to take off 6 various bolts that take this off, and it takes the carry rack off just to get at the taillight bulb. Very difficult situation. They keep improving these to the point where you can't work on even their most simple basic motorcycle. And that's another con. It's a good bike. It runs really good. It'll cruise at 50 on the speedometer, which is 55 miles an hour. You'll have a hard time getting more than that out of it on a level road with no wind. But that's plenty fast enough for the highway. And around here, I just cruise around on the back roads at 40, 45 miles an hour anyway, so it works out just fine. Does have a locking gas cap, which does not flip up on a hinge like all my newer ones do. It unlocks and comes out, and then you got to find a place to lay it that's not too dirty while you gas up your bike. And the old XLs, of course, had dual shocks on it, and this does have a non-adjustable monoshocks. We used to have preload adjustable dual shocks, and now you have a non-adjustable shock. It does have fairly soft suspension, and so it rides good. It isn't going to be good enough suspension for real heavy jumps and things like that off-road, especially if you weigh more than my 130 pounds. It's got a 428 chain, and it has a helmet lock. That's something that is missing on most motorcycles today. All the latest motorcycles that I have gotten, like my CB500X, my Versys X, my Moto Guzzi that I just sold, none of them had a helmet lock on them. The little monkey has a helmet lock on it. But bikes have just pretty much done away with helmet locks, so I have to buy accessory helmet locks and put on them. Like on my Versys X, I put it up here. And on my CBX, it's right here. So just a little something to keep in mind. You can get those on Amazon for almost nothing. Okay, that's it.